minutes here for the waiting room. And maybe one more minute here and then we'll get started. What do you think of that, Doug? Does that make sense?
That sounds good.
Thanks to everybody for being here. Hope everybody's doing well. See some people waving. That's a good lower school thing. All right, Doug, Marnie, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. What do you think? Is that good? Okay, well, so good evening, everybody. It's nice to see so many of you. This is what seeing people is like these days, I guess. It happens on a computer screen, and that's, but it is. I can't tell you how nice it is to see you. My name's Seth Hanford. I'm head of school here at the Academy. For those of you whom I haven't had the chance to meet, I do see some new families and want to say welcome. I'm thrilled you're here. We're thrilled you're here. Thank you very much for being here, not only tonight, but for being with us. I did want to let everybody know we're recording this. We're going to record this so that we can put this up on the website afterwards so people who weren't able to join us tonight can still glean the information. And so we are recording. I wanted to make sure everybody knew that. So I'm going to be very brief. Some of you will think that there's not much chance of that, but I promise you I will be. We have other people you're going to hear from that are definitely more important than I am in your kids' lives and in your kids' experience here. So they're going to talk a lot with you about what this year is going to look like. So in a minute, I'm going to turn things over to Marnie Cutt, who's our assistant head of school for external affairs, and she's going to talk some about all the preparations that have gone on campus and talk a little bit about some of the logistical things and safety things that we're anticipating. Doug Sept, who is our assistant head of school for academic affairs, is going to talk then about some of the academic issues. We have some other people who will jump in and help give some more color to what this year is going to look like. And so you're going to hear from some people. Everybody here is muted. And so the reason we'd like to do that is just so that we can sort of keep the program going here a little bit. What we're going to ask that you do is really, listen to the presentations you're going to hear, which will be relatively short. We're not going to cover everything that was in that reopening document. If you have looked at that, which I hope a lot of you have, it's quite a thing, and it's getting near 30 pages. That's your summer reading. And it's a lot of detail. I think it's apparent. I hope it's apparent. What we've been working on over the summer. There's a lot of detail in that document. So we're not going to go through all of that, but we are going to hit what we consider to be some of the highlights. We'll do some Q&A at the end. So we would ask that you put questions that you might have in the chat, and then we will address those. We're also going to use what's asked to continue to create stuff on our website. So we would anticipate that after these welcome sessions, which are going to take place, early childhood, lower schools tonight, middle school tomorrow night, upper school on Thursday night, we will put some FAQ information and things like that up on the website to try to flesh out even a little bit more. I think it's my sort of role in this to say a couple of things. One is to thank the many, many people who have been involved in our effort to reopen. If I were on this, I understand that there are questions about all that. I understand that a lot of schools in the area are not are not contemplating opening in person at the beginning of the year. Why do we think we can do that? I do think it's worth hitting a couple of highlights about that. The size, the campus setting, the schedule, our adaptability, the attention to detail that was present in that document. I think all of those things make this possible for us as things stand right now. I want to be really clear. We continue to watch every day. I am not, we are going to adapt as we have always done. That is the best way to say it. We are going to continue to watch. If things need to adapt, we will do that quickly. We think we have a schedule and a way of doing this that can transition back and forth from in person to online and vice versa, if and when we need to, because we know that those, we are in a very uncertain place. You could choose any aspect of this virus, and we could, if we did an exercise that I might do with some of our middle or upper school students, where I would say, look, let's do an internet research project that takes 5 minutes, and let's find all the facts we can about this having to do with the coronavirus. I guarantee you we would be able to find, with no trouble at all, conflicting interpretations of what we know and what we don't know about this virus. We will continue to watch. Having said that, our plan right now is to reopen in person with the option for people to study online. Our plan is that right now. Could that change? That could absolutely change. We are going to continue to look at that and adjust as we need to. I'm really proud of the place we are in our planning. And again, I want to thank everybody who's been involved in that. You're going to hear from a number of people tonight who have been really involved in that. And again, as I said, you'll have a chance to answer some questions. Thanks so much to all of you for being here. I'm going to mute in a minute here and sort of play MC. Thanks to all of you for being here, not just tonight, but in general. The show of confidence about that is certainly what inspires us. I can tell you that our mission has inspired us as we've thought about how we can do this. Your kids have inspired us. I never thought I'd say this, but I miss seeing the car line up about there. It's right about now that some of you would start showing up for tomorrow morning, actually. I might pass you on my way out. That's only a little bit of a joke. All that's going to look a little bit different this year, but we're certainly excited about what 2021 can look like at Elgin Academy. So I'm going to turn it over first to Marnie, who's going to talk with you a lot about the details associated with what's going to happen on campus and what some of that is going to look like. And I want to thank both her and Doug, especially for all of the work that has gone into the significant amount of planning that's had to happen to get us where we are today. Marnie.
Well, good evening, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Marnie Cutt. Like Seth said, this is my 10th year at Elgin Academy and my 2nd year in the position as the Assistant Head of School for External Affairs. That essentially means that I'm managing all of the non-academic functions at Elgin Academy, which would include our facilities and the facilities team, led by Andrew Kolba. So a lot of this here is with my facilities hat on. I have one daughter who is I'm finding a hard time believing is going into 8th grade this year. She started here in preschool. So we're looking at the end of middle school and starting to think about the upper school, which is a fairly amazing place to be considering we've been here since she was 3. So thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm going to go through some of the elements of the document, but obviously not all of them. Feel free to ask questions in the chat as we're moving on. I do hope everybody has had a chance to look at it. It does have a lot of information in there, so we hope that's a good guide for you. So, our plan, when we built it, we really did it based on the idea of there's so many layers of safety that we want to include here. So this was not just one element or one item or one thing that's going to keep us safe, but it's a whole bunch of items working together. So that includes the creative use of our classroom space, using the outdoor space as much as possible when the weather is good. Keeping different grades in different buildings to sort of minimize the possibility of sort of exposure to everybody. Social distancing, face coverings, good health and hygiene practices, all of that, together with a community that really, Elgin Academy is a community that thrives on working together. So we feel like between all of that and our community members who will work together towards a common good can make everything, as safe as possible as we can here at Elgin Academy. That doesn't mean that there isn't risk, right? We know that there's risk. We cannot prevent everything, but we can mitigate it as much as possible. So to that end, shortly you will be getting a waiver via email that we will need to have signed, and we're asking our faculty as well as our families to sign this waiver, indicating that you understand this risk. And so you'll be getting some instructions about how to sign that. That waiver does need to be returned before your students can come back to campus. So I ask when you get that email to take care of that as soon as possible. Otherwise, we'll be getting many, many calls from us because we want everybody to be here when they can be here. So moving on to face coverings. We are going to require that face coverings are worn at all times, obviously except when students are eating. But this will also include for the time being when students are outside. We're going to monitor this and see if that can evolve over time. But what we're trying to do here at Elgin Academy is create a habit of wearing a face covering, so it becomes less of a sort of conversation, but more of a habit. Everybody can form a good, healthy habit about that. We're going to monitor our students. We understand there's, different ages have different it would be a different learning curve in terms of wearing face coverings, and we're going to monitor that, and we are going to be communicating with families, but we are going to ultimately expect that everybody is wearing a face covering because, that is the best way to keep us all as safe as possible. We do have a handful of face coverings that we are not going to allow. We have read research that indicates that these are not the strongest face coverings, and so those will include bandanas, the gator style masks, and any masks that have that little black plastic thing on there, the one-way valve. Those have been shown to not be as effective in preventing the spread of coronavirus, and so we will not be allowing those masks on campus. We will have a very small supply of masks should a student lose a mask or forget a mask, but we cannot really be the ones that are supplying the masks for you. That we're really relying on you, the families, to pick the best mask for your student that fits them the best, that's the most comfortable, that is the most protective. Face coverings must be worn properly at all times as well. So that means over the face and the nose. We will be including information about that in the student handbook for our students as well. So that will be an expectation for everybody. And that's an expectation for our faculty and staff too. So that's not just the students. Each morning, before you can come to campus, you will be asked to fill out a self-certification app on behalf of your student. And this will have information. It'll be asking screening questions, asking to report a temperature. Is the student experiencing any of the COVID-19 symptoms? And I'm not going to go through the whole long list now, but those will all be on the app. And has anyone in your household been exposed or tested positive? And we need everybody to fill that out every day. You will not be allowed to leave Carline until we have proof that you have passed that app for the day. Your phone will receive a notification that you can show us at Carline. We are going to ask everybody to do this, all students, all families, all faculty and staff, any visitors. Everybody's going to sort of be in this together again about building that trust together and making sure that we're all filling out that app every day. We will have information if you did not pass the app, and we will ask that you do not come to school, and then we'll work with you about when the student could return. We will also know who hasn't filled out the app, and so we can reach out to families as well. It's really, really important that you do this so that we can get everybody on campus and get everybody going as quickly as possible in the mornings. Yes, so we will ask that you do not leave until we do see that your student has passed the app. For the time being, we are going to have parents are not going to be allowed to walk their students into the classes. I know that is been a very common occurrence, particularly in the lower school. But we're just, for now, we are trying to have mostly just students and faculty and staff coming into the buildings. And so everybody will be dropped off at Carline. That includes on that first day of school. Unfortunately, we think it's best and safest for everybody to stay in their cars and send the students out onto the quad to go into the classroom buildings. So please note, we're not going to have you guys come in on the first day of school. And I'm going to have a little bit more information later on about pickup and drop off, because we're making a little bit of changes to that this year. But I want to go through some of the health and safety things first. So when should your students stay home? We would really like to start changing our way of thinking. If your student has a sniffle, and in the past you would have said, oh, you're fine, it's just a cough, it's just a sniffle, go to school. We're asking this year that you don't send students to school. We really want to change the way people are thinking about that. We have online options available for students if they cannot come to school because they are not feeling, they're feeling under the weather. They can learn from home. We can do that. So we really, really want to encourage you to sort of change your way of thinking about when a student comes to school or not. Because the symptoms of COVID-19 are very similar to a lot of other conditions like colds, like strep. And so, anytime we see a student with some of those symptoms here, we have to start kind of going through our protocols. And so it would be most helpful to everybody if we can just sort of create that habit of not coming in to school. Obviously, if a student has any reason to believe they have COVID or symptoms of COVID or are living with somebody who has tested positive, they're going to have to stay home. Again, if they're feeling well, they can do their coursework online. And if they're not feeling well, then we would go through the normal process like we would when a student is sick. So we certainly don't expect your student to be learning when they're very, very ill, but if they are feeling okay, they can certainly join the class. So we don't want you to feel like you're missing either. From time to time, we think we will have to close either parts or all of the campus. So we are using the cohorting system. And so in the lower school, each classroom is going to be its own cohort. So each grade essentially is going to be its own cohort of people. And the idea is that, we can reduce the amount of closures when possible, so that we can really sort of focus and target on when the exposures were. So, if a cohort member has symptoms of COVID-19, develops those symptoms in school or were reported from out of school that we have reason to believe that the individual in the cohort has COVID-19, that cohort will move to connected learning or remote learning for a minimum of 48 hours. That gives us time to sort of work with the person, have them work with their doctor, get tested if they need to, clean the rooms if we need, as needed. And so that gives us a little bit of time and a little bit of certainty for you all, right? So you'll know for sure it's a 48-hour closure every time. Instead of saying, well, this time we only had to close it for half a day, and this time we're going to have to close it for 3 days. So always 48 hours, and then we'll be in contact with you about what the next steps are. So if it turns out that there is a positive case of COVID in that cohort, then of course that cohort will need to stay home for the appropriate amount of time until we can bring you all back on campus. There might be other closures as well, right? If a certain percentage of our community tests positive, we might decide that it's time to close the school down, move to remote learning for a few days, not close the school, excuse me. Or, if there's an internal or external conversation from the state or from the county or, the federal government, then we would have to move to the remote learning option as well. So I did see a question pop up in the chat. A cohort is a classroom. So that could be 3rd grade, that could be 2nd grade, that could be early childhood. That's what we're considering a cohort for the purposes of lower school. What if your student develops symptoms at school, right? That's a really big question. So we have an isolation room that we're setting up on the 2nd floor of North Hall, where a student would go if we believe they are symptomatic with COVID symptoms, and they will be monitored by Jen Brown. And she will, make sure that there's safe in that room, and that if there's any sort of medical issues that she's attending to them. But we will ask that somebody come within an hour, if possible, to pick that student up. Right? We want to kind of make sure that we're getting people off campus as quickly as possible. We're asking that in the other divisions. We're asking that of faculty members as well. Again, we just want to kind of make sure that we minimize the risk of any potential transmission. If a student is believed to be symptomatic with COVID-like symptoms, we would then send that cohort home also for that minimum of 48 hours. So this is going to require a degree of flexibility on families' parts, we understand, and a lot of need to sort of pay attention to communications from Elgin Academy. When can your student return? So we will need clearance from a physician for your student to return, and that has to be faxed or emailed to us before your student can come back on campus. And that's clearing them of having any sort of COVID-19 symptoms or, making sure they don't have strep or anything else. So we're going to really be consistent about needing that documentation before your child can come back. And this is all laid out a little more clearly in that document as well, too. If a person has a negative COVID-19 test, then obviously, we can work with them to come back. And if there's a positive test, then we'll have to have people, stay on the remote learning plan for longer while we're kind of working through that. So I think that covers most of the main health and safety things. If you have other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We can talk about them, after Doug's presentation. I just want to talk a little bit about the changes to drop off and pick up this year. So we are going to move all of the car lines. For those of you who have been here before, you would remember that sort of middle school dropped off in a different spot and upper school was a little bit more sort of free flowing. Everybody we're asking now to come through the top of Academy Place, which is where all the car lines will go now. So it's going to require a little bit of, there's going to be a little bit more traffic there. So we are going to actually stagger the times a little bit. So we're going to ask that lower school families don't drop off your students before 8 a.m. Which before you could do it starting at about 7:45. We're going to ask that you guys don't come to campus, if at all possible, to 8 a.m. Unless you have like a student in middle school too, because their car line is going to start a little bit earlier. But this is going to give us time to make sure that everybody's checked to have passed that screening app. We're going to monitor this and make sure that's working right. And this might be an area where we might decide we might need to make some adjustments or changes as the year moves on, but this is where we're starting with that. So, again, thank you for your flexibility and your patience as we work through this. The first couple of days while we're getting up and running, car line might take a little bit longer, but we just want to make sure that we're doing it right. In terms of pickup, what we're going to do for pickup, instead of having the students waiting outside like they used to in their lines by classes, we're going to use the inclement weather plan, which means that the students will wait in their classroom, and when you pull up, they'll be called to come out. That way we don't have kids kind of sort of wandering around together. If you have an early childhood student, if they're a full day student, they'll be picked up at the top of Academy Place as well. If you have an early childhood student who is a half day student, they'll be picked up outside of the early childhood classrooms, and we can sort of talk with the early childhood families a little bit more specifically, because I don't know that there's, I think it's mostly K through 4 on this call. So, again, please come on time and pick them up. Please pick the right time for drop off, so we can sort of make sure that everybody is getting into their cars, as quickly and as efficiently as possible with the least amount of sort of traffic in hallways. In terms of follow-up communications, we are going to send blasts to our community with community updates. We will let you know if your cohort has to close. We will, make sure that you're aware of that. We will be sending emails. We will follow up with calls as needed. We're not going to, we really want you to make sure that you know that, in terms of sort of regular kind of updates that aren't really cohort specific or anything like that, please make sure you read EA News and Notes on Thursdays. That's where we're going to have updates. We will also be putting the updates on our website. We have a page dedicated to all of this, but please make sure that you're consistently getting your news at EA News and Notes and reading it through, because that's the way you're going to stay the most up to date with most of the information. I did see some questions pop up.
Yeah, I was going to say, Marnie, so we could do these now if you want, or I suspect they might lead to some conversation. So I'm wondering whether we want to, finish it up and then take them at the end. But I was going to say to people, we will get to the questions. We're not ignoring the questions. And again, some of our answers might be, I just want to reiterate, not in a lot of these cases, but some of our answers might be, we're still working some of these things out. That's where some of our follow-up communication will come to. This will continue to be changing, and we'll continue to be thinking as we see how things play on the ground, frankly. So Marnie, you may want to be taking a look and thinking about how you would answer some of these, or who would, and maybe we shift things over to Doug. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Sounds good. So good evening. My name is Doug Sept. I've been at Elgin Academy for 8 years as the upper school director, and I'm transitioning into my new role as assistant head of school for academic affairs. So since that's a new role for me to work with a lot of you in, I just want to say a few words to introduce myself. I've been in education for 25 years now, primarily spent most of that time at 2 preschool through 12 independent schools, one in Missouri where I was a teacher and administrator, and then again at EA for the past 8 years. I do have 2 children at EA. When we first moved here 8 years ago, my son Alex started in grade 3, and he'll be an 11th grader this year. And my daughter Kate started in 1st grade, and she'll be joining the upper school this year in 9th grade. So I've been a long-time EA parent as well. My role is really to facilitate the academic and co-curricular and overall student program experience preschool through 12. And the way that I'm able to do that successfully is to really collaborate with the team of educators I work with. There's really 2 main groups I've been working with going back to even prior to spring break as we were transitioning to this sort of situation. One group is called the Faculty Innovation Team. This is a group of teachers from all divisions, from the lower school specifically. Both Harry Gold and Courtney Baborsi remember that team. That team is focusing on things like curricular development, professional development, and in fact, they've met quite often going back to spring break when we transitioned to online learning, really helped our teachers make the most of that experience for our students, and then they've done a lot of planning this summer as we're getting ready for this year. And the other team I work with closely is the student support team. The 2 people who are on this call who are members of that are Harry Gold again and Helen Elion, our Director of Personalized Learning, school counselor. We focus that group on social emotional growth, ensuring that we've got a program that all grade levels that works for, in general, with what's important in terms of social emotional growth, but also we focus on specific student needs. So between those 2 groups, we're able to work a lot in terms of creating the best program for students. Obviously, coming into the school year, we've had to think about how the COVID situation affects our program and in what ways we don't want it to affect our program. So first off, I want to assure you that what's going to happen in the classroom in the lower school is the same high quality teaching that has always happened with, of course, extra attention to student needs. We know this will be a challenging year for students socially, emotionally, getting used to some of the new systems we have on campus to make sure everyone stays healthy. And I know that our faculty members will do a wonderful job in working with students. Lower school will continue, so they'll have their in-class learning, whereas as has been mentioned in the cohort system, every grade level, like in the past, will have their own room. Typically, lower school students would then move as a class to what are called specials classes. Those are things such as Spanish, art, music, library, and PE. This year, those specialist teachers are going to come to the classroom. That'll minimize the amount of campus that our lower school students have to travel to. They'll be able to come to the classroom, teach, and teach successfully there, and still be able to keep our students in the same area. The only class that right now would make sense for us to have leave the classroom will be PE. So we've been working closely with Craig Pinson, our PE teacher, to plan out what that will look like and how he can make use of our good space on the quad and the gymnasium when necessary, and plan activities that still allow for students to be active, but still following good health protocols. Those schedules have been set. The lower school teachers will share them with students as they start the year. You may have seen in the document that we are moving to a trimester system that has some effect in terms of grade reporting, and I'll talk about it in a moment. It also has effects in lower and middle school as far as schedules go. Since our specialist teachers often teach in either the middle and upper school as well as the lower school, every trimester there will be a new special schedule. So the students in the lower school will still have the same specials, but it may be moved to different times just to accommodate schedules in other areas. When online instruction becomes necessary, and this could happen on an individual basis, it might be a full grade level or cohort, or it might be that whole campus school-wide we have to move to remote or online learning. The teachers will be adept at communicating how that will happen. I know that last year, Seesaw was an app that was used a lot, and then we're going to continue using that. Zoom will still be a way for teachers to connect with students as well. And I've been very impressed. Our faculty members have continued professional development throughout the summer to make sure that they're on the cutting edge of what works well remotely with students. For example, a number of our faculty members have attended an ISM virtual teaching webinar. It was a 2-week webinar, basically. We've had others who have focused more on early childhood and preschool as is their purview. It'll be really important communication during those times. Our teachers will do a wonderful job of communicating with families and with students so that they know how and when they can access certain things. At the same time, you as a family should feel free to reach out to teachers, reach out to Harry Gold or Helen Elion, and I'll discuss again their roles a little bit more in a moment, or reach out to me directly if there's anything I can do to help facilitate that better. One of the pieces that was mentioned already, and it's in the document, if you're interested in having your child start online learning at any point in time, whether it's to begin the school year or as the school year progresses, if you're just simply in a situation where you prefer to keep your child at home, please reach out to me directly. We can coordinate making that happen. Ways that might look, we are looking at improving some camera systems in classrooms so that students could actually join classes live for a little time. It would not be pedagogically appropriate for a lower school student to stare at a screen for 6.5 hours for the whole entire day, but the teacher could work out certain times where that child could join the class virtually and be able to interact with the teacher and their peers. At other times, it might be the teachers providing some content and resources for students, either that they have created or recorded on their own, or that they are sharing out with the whole class. Again, if that's something that interests you before the school year or at any point, please contact me and we'll work to make arrangements to be able to work with your child while they're off campus. Communication, as I already mentioned a couple times, really key. As you know already, a significant amount of communication happens on an informal basis. That's teacher to parent or parent to teacher at any given time in the school year. That's always the quickest and easiest way to ask questions, to share thoughts about what's going on in the classroom or online. Friday folders has been an important communication piece to send out general communications in the past. We respect the need to do that. We're probably going to be considering what can we begin to share more online as opposed to in a paper format, just trying to minimize the amount of physical items going home in that manner. But do know that we are going to keep up with that sort of weekly general communication with families. I mentioned that we're moving to a trimester system. What that means in the lower school is in past years, you would get quarterly reports. So, October, winter break, and usually somewhere in mid-March, your family would get an update. This time, they're going to be trimester progress reports. So your family will get formal reports 3 times during the school year that include both progress marks for your child as well as narrative comments from all the teachers. So those will happen at the trimester breaks, which are essentially mid-November and early March. But again, the teachers will be attuned to when informal communication needs to happen during those times. Oh, and I should mention June, of course, end of the school year, the end of the 3rd trimester. Finally, we will continue to have learning plan conferences this year. So important times for teachers to work directly with parents and students starting at the grade levels. Right now, we're still planning those dates, fall and spring. And we will be talking in the future about how it's best to handle those, whether those are best handled on campus or online. Again, just to minimize the amount of people coming to campus at any given time. Just a couple additional notes I have. Students will be eating lunch in the classroom with their homeroom teachers or other adults. We are not going to have students move over to Seals Hall for lunch. We will, at times, it may be that there's another adult on campus, perhaps myself, Mr. Hanford, or I should say Seth Hanford. I'm talking to a bunch of adults. Seth Hanford, Helen Elion, any of the specials teachers will ensure that students have someone in the room to interact with them as lunch is happening. But again, they're going to stay in their classroom, part of that whole cohort system. We are going to give them some outside time for recess. What might look different is it might be recess as a cohort, so as a grade level, instead of mixing grade levels. Again, trying to just contain the amount of students they come in interaction with. For the preschool and pre-K, they have access to their own kind of play area. They've always had that on the west side of North Hall. There's some small playground equipment that the preschool and pre-K will continue to use as their own cohort. At the beginning of the school year, we're not going to be able to have students access the main playground equipment. Again, that's kind of a cohort and a cleaning concern that we just have right now that we haven't figured out a solution for yet. If as the year goes on, we come up with some ways where we can access that, we will. But at this point in time, we will be determining ways to provide recess opportunities a grade level at a time in different areas of the quad. I should mention with lunch, by the way, and this I think was in the document, lunch service will eventually become available for those that like to use the lunch service, but it won't be served in the cafeteria. Again, since children are eating in their classrooms, the lunch, if families order it, will be brought to the classroom for students to be able to eat there. And finally, I do want to mention extended day. Several weeks ago, we sent out a survey about extended day. We've looked at that data. We're still working with it. I will say that a number of families who potentially have used it in the past did not express a desire to have extended day this year. But we do recognize that there are a set number of families, a smaller number, who really want to make use of that service. At this point in time, we are still working on plans for how we could do that in a cohort system. Because with a cohort system, theoretically, we're trying to keep grade levels apart. Extended day in the past has been really divisionally based. So if you have questions about extended day, you're welcome to reach out and ask me. In the meantime, we're going to continue to leave that on being one of the things we're working on. And if we get to a point where we're able to determine a system that will work well, we'll communicate with you about starting that. So I see that some questions have popped up. I am going to wait, and they will be addressed as we get towards the end of this. But I do want to stop and have two introductions and have a couple other people say a few words. One is Harry Gold. A number of you know Harry. His role this year has transitioned to be the 4th grade teacher. He's also the lower school lead teacher, so he's kind of a go-to person for me and for families and teachers in terms of the lower school academic program. So I'm going to have Harry unmute himself for a moment and he can say a few words.
Yeah, the few words I was about to say, I think Doug had pretty much said it. My name is Harry Gold. I'm very pleased to say my personal welcome to everyone. Welcome back to the new school year. I'm very much looking forward to being back in the classroom with 4th graders and to working with the faculty in my new role as a lower school lead teacher. For those who are new to me, to EA, and perhaps for those who have been here for some time, I've had 3 kids here at EA, 2 still here, a junior and a senior. And my oldest, Shireen, graduated 2 years ago and is about to be a junior at Grinnell in Iowa. So very much looking forward to, although it's challenging times, to getting back in school.
Great. All right. Thank you, Harry. Again, Harry will be a good go-to person with questions as well. So in addition to being able to contact classroom teachers, you can reach out to Harry, you can reach out to me, and just know that any conversations where we need to collaborate, we will be doing that. The other person I want to give an opportunity to say a few words is Helen Elion, our Director of Personalized Learning. So I'll ask her to unmute herself and say a few words.
Hi, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, as Doug just said, I'm the Director of Personalized Learning and the School Counselor at EA. And I work with all students and families at EA, Cross Divisional. In regards to lower school, last year I ran social groups divided up by each class, or some of the classes were some of the grade levels were combined. But I hope to continue doing that this year. I plan on continuing to do that this year. I also work with students who have accommodations or supports as well. So I reach out to the families and we coordinate that support with the parents and the families and with the teachers. And then I also continue to provide one-on-one support to students when requested or needed. And I will be going into the classrooms as well, more this year than I did last year, to run larger groups around social emotional lessons. And then as always, I'm available for parents and families for any support in regards to their student when needed. And I look forward to being back on campus and seeing all the students. Oh, and also I also have 2 younger kids that also attend EA. They will be in pre-K this year.
Excellent. Thank you, Helen. So I want to end my time with just talking about what you can expect next in terms of communication. So as we get close to the school year, probably by the end of next week, all lower school families should receive an invitation to sign up for Get Acquainted conferences. These have been a standard part of us getting ready for the school year. Those Get Acquainted conferences happen in the week leading up to the beginning of school. So the first day of school for most of the lower school, K through 4, is on Friday, August 28th. So the Get Acquainted conferences would happen prior to that. We recognize that what Marnie talked about not wanting parents to get out of cars and come onto campus the first day, that can be a very difficult thing. So what we're going to do with Get Acquainted conferences is we're going to give families the choice. For those that do want to have a Get Acquainted conference, Get Acquainted conference on campus so that they can see the learning space prior to the school year, you're welcome to schedule yours such that you would meet with your child's teacher in their classroom. Given that it'll be a limited number of people on campus because students won't be there yet, we're comfortable with allowing that level. And again, you as a parent might like to see how the space is set up so you can see it's in a socially distanced fashion. If, on the other hand, you prefer to hold that conference virtually with the teacher, we'll make sure that's possible as well. So you can have a Get Acquainted conference with the teacher via Zoom. So when we reach out later next week and ask you to sign up for those, we'll also ask for your personal preference and how you'd like to have that conference facilitated. And then, of course, Friday, August 28th is the first day of school for our friends in kindergarten through 4th grade, and then Monday the 31st for our preschool, pre-kindergarten friends. With that, I'll hand things over to Seth, and I think he's going to help moderate maybe some questions from the chat that Marnie and I and Seth can address as we move forward. So thank you.
Yeah, so thanks, and thanks for the questions in the chat. So what I think maybe we can do, and again, let me just say in general, certainly an open invitation to reach out to any of us about very specific things, as who knows whether every specific question is sort of answerable in a forum like this. So I'm sorry that for the difficulty of that. Maybe we'll just start with a group of sort of related health ones or health safety ones, kind of, Marnie. Maybe you took a look at some of these. The question about someone who has the sniffles within a cohort, or what that might look like for the rest of the cohort. So I'm assuming that means someone who hasn't tested, someone who's not positive for COVID or that kind of thing, and how might we treat that?
Oh, hold on. I have to let her unmute.
All right, thank you. So I think there's going to be a difference between if somebody stays home because they're feeling under the weather, and versus whether somebody has been sort of demonstrably proven positive for COVID. So if somebody stays home because they're not feeling well, that doesn't necessarily mean anything is going to happen to that cohort, right? That would only become we would only shut that cohort down or move to remote learning if we found out that a student in that, or a faculty member, was tested positive. I'm not sure if that answers the question or not, or. So we will differentiate between sniffles and COVID ultimately. The challenge when we're on campus is that there's so many of the symptoms are the same, is that we have to be really, really careful about when we're assessing the students. And we do have a protocol that we put into that document that sort of shows the workflow and our decision-making process and our thought process about that. And there are certain symptoms where we will monitor a student before we decide, oh my gosh, we think they really need to sort of investigate going to a doctor and investigate taking that COVID test.
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump here, Marnie, because I think there's a related question lower. So if a student's displaying illness symptoms not related to COVID, and I understand that's a little bit of a moving target, because I think we're finding out that a lot of things, it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. But how are we thinking of handling that, and specifically in where we would put a student?
So if we feel that a student does have COVID symptoms, and I saw there was a question about if somebody was, like nauseous or had certain GI symptoms, then because right now GI symptoms are considered to be a symptom for COVID, and until we get a different list from the health department, we have to consider that to be sort of a potential COVID case, and we would put them in the isolation room. If somebody comes to Jen Brown, in this case to Jen Brown, who was our division secretary, division assistant, and has a cut or a scrape or, something that is clearly not a COVID-like symptom, they would be treated in her office in the regular sort of where we were managing students who weren't feeling well last year.
And then let's see, back to a car line question, maybe, Marnie. So there's Jody had a question about if you're part of a carpool within the same cohort. So if you've got carpool that has kids from multiple families in it, how will they demonstrate their compliance?
It will be possible to take a screenshot of the sort of proof. I keep calling it a badge for lack of a better word. So of the graphic that you'll get from the app that says, yes, today's the day that we passed the test, that can be screenshotted and then texted to somebody. So texted to the parent who was driving.
Okay. And then just moving down here a little bit, the clarification about what we're going to handle what we're going to ask of kids in terms of, dedicated hand washing. So, and when we're going to be emphasizing that. And I think the question here towards the bottom is, will dedicated hand washing arrival at school before lunch, prior to snack? So the answer to all that is very much yes. And that's something that, teachers are going to monitor. And there are also going to be hand sanitizers around outside, at the entrance to rooms and at the entrance to buildings.
Yeah.
Right, Marnie, is that?
Yes, at the entrance to each classroom, there will be a hand sanitizing station mounted on the wall. And then obviously we will work with the teachers to make sure that they are, sending the kids for appropriate hand washing at all these times when you arrive at school, before you eat, after you eat, things like that. Because we do want to promote really good hand hygiene, because we know that's really important to mitigate the spread.
So a question about, maybe two related questions. One about, are we going to require that kids get tested for COVID every time they have a runny nose? And then a second question about clearance for somebody to come back. And so I know some of this is in the document, but maybe you could just review that quickly.
So
or review those two things quickly.
There will be a set of symptoms and a set of triggers that will say to us, you need to go to see your physician. And then that physician would make the determination about whether your student should take the COVID-19 test or not, right? So a physician is going to be better qualified than we are to sort of make that determination. And the physician will either say, absolutely, you should take the COVID-19 test, and then that process would start, or the physician will say, you know what, you're fine, you absolutely can go right back to school, here's a note clearing you, you send that to us, we send it back. Or the physician will say, oh, you don't have COVID-19, but you're not well enough to go to school, and so, you'll have to wait to get the clearance, until you sort of work through whatever symptoms of whatever condition you might have. But not every time somebody has the sniffles do I anticipate they would have to get a COVID-19 test. No.
And that answers the question as well too about coming back. The question about whether there's been discussion regarding testing children for COVID prior to the start of the school year, and that is something that certainly we've had some conversation about the usefulness of tests. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Marnie, or I could as well.
We decided not to ask for tests because that is a very, very specific snapshot of a very, very specific time of a very, very specific day. And since this is a community where people are coming and going every day and, maybe going to do other activities after school or going to the Jewel with mom and dad, or, it's not a confined sort of situation like maybe some universities are kind of thinking of it as, where their students are staying on campus and they're not kind of going out into the broader world. But because our students, do a lot of different things, we don't really know that there's a ton of reason to do the test, because that's such a very specific snapshot.
Might shift to some of these academic questions here in a minute. There is not a nurse on campus each day for the full day. Jen Brown, who is you've seen referred to and is hiding on the screen now, but has been listening to all this, is actually trained as a nurse, but does not serve that purpose for us. Sorry, I lost track of one here, and I do certainly. We can consider the name of the isolation room. That's I like that. So we can think about that.
Certainly come up with a more positive name for that.
Yeah, I like that.
Comfort room. Yep.
Yeah, that seems pretty good. Right now, I think we are not anticipating um, uh, breaks from wearing the masks. We are going to continue to monitor all this, but it was interesting because in working with our and Marnie, you can jump in on this if I don't get this quite right. In working with the pediatrician who worked with us on the plan, his practices approach really helped us sort of think this through a little bit. And their practices approach is really encouraging people to get used to used to doing that. And so I think that's going to be the approach we're going to take for a number of different reasons. Do you think I have that right, Marnie?
Yeah, I mean that is sort of where I got the notion of creating a habit of it. I thought that was a really, really good way of looking at it, right? So it becomes a habit, and it becomes like putting on a seatbelt in a car or something like that. It's just something that you do, and I think that will be the most effective way to to bring us all along as a community, the adults and the students included, is to just everybody get it into the habit.
And then one question here about face shields. Just we would not want kids to wear face shields on their own without a mask. Sorry, I didn't say that right. We would not want them to wear face shields without a mask, but with a mask, that is okay. Certainly, we're not going to restrict somebody from doing that. During recess and gym, at least at the beginning, we are going to have kids wear the masks. Is that right, Marnie?
That is
even
what
outside.
we're waiting for right now, yeah, and that is, I think, something we will review and monitor closely.
Yep, and the same thing about breaks with that. Certainly, we know that it isn't an easy thing. I'm going to shift here. It doesn't mean we can't come back to some health questions, but let me just jump into a few academic questions. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, while Marnie's been answering some of those, I glanced through the academics.
Yep.
So you want me to just?
So you want me to shut up? Is that what you're saying? I got you. That's fine.
Yeah, I can start to address them. So one of the questions is who beyond tonight, who is a good resource for academic questions? And at this point in time, given that we're still theoretically in the summer, I think the best points of contact would either be me or Harry. Both of us is going to have more availability at this point, and so we would encourage you to reach out to one or both of us simultaneously. Obviously, as we transition into the school year, it's going to be the classroom teacher who's going to be the best resource for academic questions at that point. But for the time being, over the next couple of weeks, feel free to send any questions to Harry and I, and whether those can be addressed in writing or we want to schedule a time for a phone call, a Zoom, or even potentially an in-person meeting if we can make that happen, we're happy to do that. A couple things with relation to trimesters. There's a question about the trimester system in the lower school. So the trimester system doesn't really have a lot of change to the lower school. Where the changes happen more with that is in how the upper and middle school programs are being kind of facilitated throughout the year. I do plan to address that for middle and upper more the next 2 nights, since that affects those more. The reason we decided to switch the lower school over to the trimester system is really twofold. One, just logistically, a lot of our specialist teachers cross over into other divisions. And so since their schedules are going to change approximately every trimester, we felt they would be important for us to be on that system. The other piece is one that actually has been a conversation for well over a year, even prior to COVID. Our school for a number of years has been working on different term systems, lower and upper school, where quarters and semesters, middle school is trimester. An issue that has caused in the past, especially for families who have children in multiple divisions, was different breaks, different days off at different times. With everyone being on a trimester system, everyone will have the same campus experience time. So when we have a day off at the end of a trimester for a writing day, that will affect all divisions, and therefore a family doesn't have to juggle which of their children are going to be on campus and which are not. So it just made sense to go to the trimester system. There was a question about which academics are affected by the trimester. In the lower school, it's few and far between. There was a question about math being a trimester thing. That is something I'll discuss at the at the middle and upper the next 2 nights. Lower school homeroom teachers are not dedicating certain subjects to certain trimesters. Your children in the lower school are going to receive all their subjects all year long. Where it does have a little bit of effect is in specials. So I will just say right off the bat that the first trimester, there's not going to be as much lower school art as there typically is. The reason of that is our art teacher who's teaching in the lower and upper school this year, Erin Van Horn. Erin's been on campus for a couple years as the art teacher in the upper school. She does have past experience working with elementary children. She's excited to fill that role again. But in order to balance those roles out, it depends on what her schedule is. Her first trimester schedule is very upper school centric, so she doesn't have as much time for lower school. However, her second trimester is solely lower school. So to ensure that your children have a cumulative amount of experience, whereas they won't have much art in the first trimester, during the second trimester, they'll have twice as much as they would typically. So in a typical year, lower school students have 1 hour of art per week. Basically, every grade level has an hour session. In the second trimester, lower school classes are going to have 2 1-hour sessions per week. So they're still going to cumulatively receive the same amount of art instruction. So that may happen with special. So again, art, PE, music, library, well, not library, there won't be a switch there. You might see an ebb and flow to how much is in each trimester. By the end of the year, they will have had a cumulative experience. All of the classroom homeroom subjects are going to be facilitated by the teachers, and that is not going to vary with the trimester system. I think originally, and then there was a question about the amount of remote learning. You know, it's a good question. Honestly, it does vary some by grade. I'm speaking to parents whose children range anywhere from 3-year-olds to 10-year-olds. Pedagogically, the amount of time they should spend accessing something on a screen varies greatly from those ages. So anecdotally, I would say at the upper end of elementary, it is likely that there might be more live online learning that happens in the span of a day, whereas at the lower end of that, it might be less just simply because it's not appropriate for them to be on the same. Will it vary based on the number of parents that request? Not necessarily. Obviously, if a cohort has to leave campus for an extended amount of time, or even that 48-hour period, there will still be instruction happening for the whole cohort at that point in time. If for some reason we need to close campus for a certain amount of time, online learning will happen exclusively for lower school families or lower school students during that time. So I would imagine seeing an increase in the amount of online instruction at times where a whole cohort or their whole school has to go in that direction. There might have been, Seth, while I was talking, some follow-up questions that popped in. So if so, let me know.
Yeah, I don't see any. We've been asked to speculate about whether we will be requiring students to take a vaccine when it comes out. So I don't have an answer to that right now. You know, that will be something we will certainly look at when you know, and hopefully when it happens. Right now, I don't have an answer to that, but I would, you know, we will certainly want to encourage that. You know, some of that will. Like a lot of these things, some of this is going to depend on how society handles some of this. So, but right now we don't have a policy in mind about that. We will definitely develop one as we get to the point where that is a relevant thing. I think we're all looking forward to that. So, I am not seeing a whole lot else. So let me let me say that I appreciate. So thank you to everybody for being here. I would certainly welcome Doug, Marnie, or I would welcome conversation following up. I think that I very much appreciate the questions. We're going to update some FAQs. I know that Bonita has been taking some notes with that in mind. So we will definitely do that. And then if there are things that you would like to follow up in particular, please do, you know, reach out to us. Glad to have those conversations. And I know I just see that Doug put that in. There's his email, and we're certainly anxious to continue to have those conversations. So you know, maybe we'll end with where we started. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being with us at Elgin Academy. Thank you for looking forward to this school year with us. Thanks for understanding that this is going to continue to be a work in progress for all of us, that we're going to continue to be thoughtful about how we're doing this. We will certainly be adjusting things. We will certainly be, analyzing how things are working. And again, we welcome individual conversations. I'll put my email here in the chat as well. And I think.
Can I just real quickly? There's a question on supply list.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you.
We did so we did go back and make some updates to supply lists. Certain things we may not ask students to bring at this point in time, or certain things we are. We also wanted to take into account that we're not sharing supplies this year, so everything we're asking the students to bring will be individual in nature. We're on the cusp of getting those posted, and I anticipate no later than this week's EA News and Notes will everyone have access to lower school supply lists.
Yep, and I want to say we continue to work on some of the finer points of the school calendar now that we have made some of these grading period decisions and things. And so, I appreciate people's understanding that process is a little slower with the volume of decisions. So, thank you, everyone. I think that's probably it, if I'm seeing the questions, but do feel free, please, to reach out. And we'll look forward to further conversation, and look forward to a great school year. And I've seen some kids sneak into the pictures. So hi, kids, good to see you. Can't wait to see you. And we will look forward to seeing all of you soon. So thanks so much, everybody, and have a great night.